In the background, you see my beautiful garage. I'm in the middle of a construction project, making a greenhouse for my wife. And this morning, I got a message from somebody I just wanted to tell you about. I've actually been engaged in a little discussion with the son-in-law of a pretty leading King James Onlyist. This leading King James Onlyist, who will remain nameless, is somebody that over the years I've developed respect for. He really knows what he's talking about. He actually is an expert in the biblical languages. I don't follow him in his views on bibliology, but I respect him. And his son-in-law, who knows who he is, but again will remain nameless, was skeptical, though courteous, regarding my ideas about dead words and false friends. So he was saying, well, why don't you just look things up? Like he said, this morning, I ran across the word sodden, S-O-D-D-E-N, not Sodom, S-O-D-O-M, sodden in Exodus 12:9. And he said, all I had to do was look it up. I mean, what's the big deal? I Googled it and I found out that it meant saturated. And he said, are you saying that we need to replace all these words, to change all these words? And my first inclination was to say, well, this isn't a false friend. This is a dead word. This is a word that nobody uses anymore. But then I thought, well, no, I guess I do know that word. But then I decided I'd go through my whole process because something didn't seem right in my linguistic gut that's been formed. Oh, by the way, this is my wife's micro-urban flower farm in the back, Blackburn Gardens, blackburngardens.com. You can follow her on Instagram. Her flowers and especially her wreaths that she's making, they're just awesome. Maybe I'll give you a little bit more of a tour. Anyway, the word sodden just didn't seem to fit super well in that context. It didn't make a lot of sense that the, thank you trade, that's my neighborhood, the item that was being sodden in this passage, it didn't make sense that it was being saturated with water. I didn't get that. So I did check other translations, and they were using the word boil consistently, and so that definitely tipped me off. The first step in my false friends process is to discern a possible false friend by either a contextual conflict, something doesn't make sense, and I have to say that wasn't really happening for me yet. I had this vague sense that maybe sodden, as I understood it, didn't work, but the real tip-off for me was checking into these other translations, and they all, I mean, every single one of them on BibleHub.com, which I often use when I just want to quick check a bunch of translations, even of varying quality, they all said boil. So I looked up the Hebrew word in a responsible original language lexicon, as I am wont to do, and it said boil. This happens to be a word in the pual stem. That's one of the Hebrew verb states, and it definitely said boil. That was the meaning of the word. So, sodden means saturate, but the Hebrew word means boil. The King James translators could have gotten it wrong, and this is one of the few times where I really thought to myself, maybe that is what happened. Maybe they did get it wrong. But I kept going through my process, and I looked it up in the Oxford English Dictionary. I was able to skip the part of the process where you look it up in a contemporary dictionary because this son-in-law of a leading King James Onlyist had already done that for me. It means saturated today. So I looked it up, and sure enough, in the Oxford English Dictionary, it says right there in the adjectival form, it used to mean boiled or seethed, and it marks this sense as obsolete. So here we go again. It's like I can't get away from these false friends. Even times when I'm thinking initially, oh, this is a dead word, not a false friend, and then I think, no, maybe it is a word that I know, so it's not a dead word. And I was thinking, I'm going to have to, this is going to be difficult to explain to this person, who's skeptical of my viewpoint, because he's going to say, if it's a word that's still used, why would you, aid and abet people's laziness? And why not just have them look it up? So I was prepared to have to say this to this guy that, maybe people could just look it up. And I myself did not realize it was a false friend until I looked at those other translations and I looked in the responsible original language lexicon. Even then I was thinking maybe the King James translators just got it wrong. That can happen, even though that's not my usual inclination. But when I finally went to the final step and looked it up in the Oxford English Dictionary, I confirmed beyond any reasonable doubt that what the King James translators intended in 1611 was a word that to them meant what boiled means to us. I think they had that word boil as in heat up in water. I guess I'll have to check on that. This is one of my rare False Friends videos where I'm going off the cuff. But they chose a word that had a set of senses that it no longer possesses. Sodden is a word that I think is probably on its way out of contemporary English. I think that it is not dead, but it is probably dying. It isn't out, however, and I definitely did know the sense saturated, full of water. But I definitely did not know that this word used to mean boil. And this is a word that I had never run across as a false friend before. I read it in the King James who knows how many times and simply went past it without fully understanding it, or I actively misunderstood it. I can't recover exactly what I thought that it meant. I'm betting that I did think that it meant saturated. So even when I get confronted with a word that I'm ready to give in on, sometimes I find, sure enough, it was a false friend.